on the Income Store live video stream at 560theanswer.com.
If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
This is a remarkable exchange. Remarkable. Involving CNN anchor, no less, Jake Tapper, who's about the only more or less sensible anchor on that station. Jake Tapper interviewing Brad Sherman. He's one of these, dorky-looking Henry Waxman types from California who's been filing articles of impeachment against Trump since like noon on January 20th of 2017.
Yeah, he's spearheading the effort.
Listen to his explanation of the conclusions that he and his pals like Jerry Nadler have drawn and why, despite what Pelosi said, impeachment is the proper course of action.
He met the legal standard. He's committed several felonies, including violation of 1512b3 of the criminal code, obstruction of justice on at least 2 occasions, probably 3, and that's just in his first 6 months.
All right, well, that's your opinion, but no legal source, no legal entity has he is guilty of obstruction of justice.
No legal entity has said to the contrary, and in fact, there are numerous scholarly articles that take a look at what he did on the record, compare it to the code, and say this is a violation of the code. But the question isn't just whether he violated the legal standard. The question is, do we have the political support? Now, I was part of starting the ball rolling in terms of talking about impeachment. And if we hadn't talked about impeachment, imagine what this president would have done if he thought he was immune. He certainly would have fired Mueller. He certainly would have done God knows what has crossed his mind. So we need to go down the road part of the way and talk about impeachment.
I mean, yes, impeachment is a political process, but do you understand what the standard he's setting? No agency has said he committed the felonies. I say he's committed, but they also haven't said he didn't commit the felonies. Your Honor, I'd like to present my case in chief against the defendant. No one can prove that the defendant didn't do the things that I'm accusing him of doing. Is that the standard that we have in our criminal justice system? Is that sort of the foundational principle? The defendant has to prove beyond reasonable doubt that he's innocent? I don't think that's the standard. Now, I understand impeachment and the House of Representatives isn't a court of law, but don't you want foundational principles of a free society to be abided by your political leaders in something as big as, say, removing a president from office? And then the other piece of this, we had to talk about impeachment to prevent him from doing things that he would have done. Something else that Brad Sherman can't prove, can't point to. It doesn't seem like Trump has been particularly bounded by all of Brad Sherman's impeachment talk for the last 2 years. But I mean, this is what you're getting into with the left. I mean, these people are authoritarians. They will suspend the rule of law. They will walk away from foundational principles of our representative republic in order to achieve their desired ends. I mean, even Jake Tapper
He seemed surprised.
It's like, what are you talking? Not surprised. He's like, what are you talking about? You're out of your mind is sort of the facial expressions you could see from Jake Tapper. But just to give you a sense of it. So there's the kind of rank and file Democrat that the Dem POTUS candidates are going to have to enlist as they compete for the nomination. Starting very soon. I mean, it's already started, but starting very soon on the debate stage and in all other respects of the campaign. And so we got Biden making overtures this week before the firefighters that he's going to get into the race in the coming weeks. And then Beto, of course, has entered the race.
Yeah, the big news this morning, sitting down with his wife, Amy.
Amy and I are happy to share with you that I'm running to serve you as the next president of the United States of America. This is a defining moment of truth for this country and for every single one of us. The challenges that we face right now, the interconnected crises in our economy, our democracy, and our climate have never been greater. And they will either consume us or they will afford us the greatest opportunity to unleash the genius of the United States of America. In other words, this moment of peril produces perhaps the greatest moment of promise for this country and for everyone inside of it.
All right.
And he said he's born to be in it.
Yeah.
He's a featured guy on Vanity Fair cover story.
All right, great. He's the next
running.
candidate who's going to save the planet. Very good. Daniel McCarthy, he's author at The Spectator. He's also the director of the Robert Novak, the Prince of Darkness, U of I grad, Robert Novak Fellowship Program at the Fund for American Studies, and editor of Modern Age, a conservative review. He's written a piece on what Democrats need to do in order to be successful, I suppose, in their own right. Daniel McCarthy, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me on.
So, Beto, Bernie, Biden, and Kamala, those are our final four here as we're approaching March Madness, you think?
It looks like it, and I have to say that is a staggeringly weak field.
Yeah, well, but now what about Beto's star power? I mean, he, raised like...
he raised $80 million during his Senate campaign.
It's a big state, 40 million people, but so unsuccessful Senate campaign, but he came close in Texas, which is a red state, and that's his launching pad once he tears down the wall in El Paso to national office.
Well, he came close in Texas in what was really sort of the perfect storm year for Democrats, and that was running up against Ted Cruz, who, is a Republican with, a lot of sort of negative charisma, people might say. And, of course, Beto still lost in Texas last year. So the idea that Texas or any other state is going to be more Democratic-leaning next year than it was in 2018 seems like an unsafe supposition for Beto. So it seems to me that Beto, having fallen short once, would fall a lot shorter next year. No, I think really what he wants to do is simply perhaps try to get onto the ticket as a vice presidential nominee.
That's what
And the contrast between him, in his 40s, and the fact that he has a party whose frontrunners, Biden and Sanders, are both pushing 80, is maybe the strongest thing he has going for him, but that's not much.
Yeah, I think he can recapture the energy, though, that he had from the midterms because people knew about him outside of Texas. I remember my friend Paula Ferris, she said, you're a rock star because people are attracted to him. He reminds me a lot of Barack Obama and how he was. He had a little bit of star power, and I know you guys probably think I'm crazy, but the whole thing is I thought that he's going to be definitely a vice president, be on a ticket with either Bernie or with Biden.
I don't think you're crazy. I think it's just a sad commentary on what constitutes star power. But the point that you raised is an interesting one. What about that, Daniel? The idea that he becomes a media darling and that elevates him.
Well, that's what he has going for him. And, it's true enough that compared to the sort of uncharismatic and rather, sort of perfunctory Democrats that we have so far running, Beto seems like, a bit of a Hollywood figure compared to them. But I just don't think that goes very far in politics. You look at someone like Barack Obama, who had other things going for him besides the fact that he had a bit of star power. Barack Obama was going to be the first black president, which was obviously one of the driving factors behind his support. Or you can go back further and look at Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton had, some of the star power that people say that Beto has. But Bill Clinton had real political skills and he had real political experience. And Beto, it seems to me, is simply the image, but none of the sort of substance or real appeal that people like Clinton or Obama had.
Now, have we settled on this? Is it Beto or Beto? Is it Kamala or Kamala?
It's Kama, like Kamala.
Has this been settled?
But I don't know Beto or Beto. What is it?
I like Beto, but maybe it's Beto.
I've heard
I don't know.
both.
Daniel, can you
Well,
adjudicate this for us?
He is, of course, really Robert, but prefers to make himself sound a bit more exotic.
Yeah. So you have a column, to win, Democrats need to be more like Trump. Perish the thought. That's not going to be received well in Democrat circles. What do you mean?
Well, basically, Donald Trump in 2016 stole what had been the Democrats' big issues, the issues that had led them to power or back to power in 2006 and in 2008. The Iraq War, the idea that American foreign policy had gone off the rails, and then the response to the Great Recession and the idea that the American middle class was under siege. Those had been the issues that Democrats capitalized on a decade ago, and then they were able to stay in power in 2012, through incumbency, through having Obama already in there. But, they didn't have those issues going for them in 2016 when Donald Trump was really the candidate of middle-class economics, the candidate of, industrial support, and the candidate of a more restrained foreign policy as well, which perhaps surprised people, but I think was one of Trump's strongest elements. So the Democrats now are basically running the way they tried to run last year, which is simply as the anti-Trump party. And that's going to get them a certain distance, and it got them, control of Congress last year. But I don't know that it's really going to be sufficient for 2020. So I think they're facing the difficulty of how you make an economic case against Trump when you have, record low unemployment, and how they're going to make a case that our foreign policy is off the rails, when in fact Donald Trump has, been pretty successful there and has kept us out of any kind of fresh conflicts like the Libyan War or the Iraq War.
Well, right. It seems like on the economic piece, the path that they're going to take is that we're going to give you a bunch of free stuff that you're otherwise paying for: college, jobs, space travel, whatever you want.
Yeah, and in fact, the private sector is doing so well right now under Donald Trump that I think the Democrats are going to have a hard time making a persuasive case that, if Uncle Sam comes in and simply starts handing out freebies, that's going to improve people's lives more than having, good paying jobs. I mean, wages are rising right now, which is just phenomenal. Donald Trump has actually succeeded not only in, lowering the unemployment rate, but actually in raising everyone's wages. I think voters are going to look at that and find that to be a more persuasive case than the idea that, we're going to reheat socialism for the 21st century with Bernie Sanders.
And I've never seen so many help wanted signs all over the city of Chicago, believe it or not. But of the candidates that have thrown their hat into the ring, who do you think could possibly come close to beating President Trump?
Well, the conventional wisdom always comes back to Joe Biden, who hasn't thrown his hat into the ring quite yet, although certainly this week he's been giving indications that he's going to get in. But Biden is one of these candidates who, seems very powerful on paper, but I think as soon as he gets in the race, he's going to have to face a lot of challenges from his left among Democrats, and then he's going to be, quite sort of bloodied and wounded by the time he gets to a general election. You saw this with Hillary Clinton as well. Before Hillary Clinton got into the race herself in 2014, 2015, she was considered, in the abstract, one of the most popular politicians in America. People just liked the idea of Hillary Clinton. But then once they actually saw her, once even Democratic voters saw her in the primaries, she lost a lot of popularity, and she had trouble fending off Bernie Sanders from the left in the primaries. And then, of course, she lost to Donald Trump in the general election. I think Joe Biden would follow exactly the same path.
Biden is just waiting to see if he can get Neil Kinnock on as a speechwriter, I presume. That's the last piece of the puzzle. Interesting, since the Vanity Fair was raised, since Beto's on the cover, Peter Hamby writing in Vanity Fair about how the Democrats can stop nuking themselves. And his point is three-pronged, I guess. Tackle economic security, prize Dubuque voters over the media, and stop listening to Twitter. Those seem to be relatively straightforward and simple, but particularly on the latter 2 points, prize Dubuque voters over the media and stop listening to Twitter, even Joe Biden doesn't seem to be able to do that.
No, it really seems like, sort of nostalgia for an earlier media environment. Twitter, in fact, seems to be, it has plenty of drawbacks. It can be quite a trivial medium. But it actually does, create this impression of engagement with, a large direct audience of Americans who can talk back to you, which I think is one of the best things about Twitter. It's not just tuning in to hear a fireside chat or to see, what a candidate has to say on television. But on Twitter, people can actually comment, fire back, and, criticize directly what they're hearing from some politician.
He is Daniel McCarthy. He's the author at The Spectator. He's director of the Robert Novak Fellowship Program at the Fund for American Studies, of which I'm a graduate of their comparative economic systems.
How'd you get in there?
Comparative political and economic systems. And he's also the editor of Modern Age Conservative Review. Oh, wait, I forgot. I got to ask. Anybody who's got the Twitter handle Tory Anarchist, I've got to ask about Brexit before we let you go. So what is happening there with PM May and Brexit?
Well, it's just dismaying. The degree of incompetence that May's government has shown is startling. Now, May herself was a Remainer. She was always opposed to Brexit. And so I think, the majority of British people who voted for leaving the European Union are looking at this prime minister, and perhaps they're not totally surprised that she's proved to be the wrong person to get the country out of this bureaucratic mess. I do think Brexit will happen. I mean, it is still, meant to be triggered in the next couple of weeks here. But, it's proving to be just one humiliation after another for Theresa May and the Conservative government in terms of actually getting the legislation in place to make this happen in any sort of orderly fashion.
Daniel McCarthy, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The stories you need to know to start your day. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM